wonderfully, yes.
Yep.
Exciting.
Awesome. Great. For those in the room, please make sure you sign in. Appreciate that so we know who is here. And so with that, I will go ahead and I'll call the City of Essex Junction Board of Civil Authority to order for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. Before we begin, I will just propose one agenda addition, and that is after the public to be heard and before the election of chair, that we just introduce who we are so that we can all know who we are around this giant table and virtually. Does anybody have any other agenda additions or changes tonight? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve of the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, George. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marcus. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Say nay. Passed unanimously. Thank you all. So we've approved the agenda going into public to be heard. This is a portion of tonight's meeting where if there are any members from the public who are not board members and would like to present or bring an issue to the board, now's the time to do so. And I'm looking around the room. I think everybody here is a board member of the Board of Civil Authority. So I think we can go ahead and move past that item, which will bring us then into what I had mentioned of a brief introduction. So just as we go around, just who we are, be greatly appreciated. I'll start us off. I'm Andrew Brown, current chair of the Board of Civil Authority and the chair of the City Council. And how do we go to Marcus?
Marcus Serta. I live on Hiawatha here in the city, and I work for a company within the Comcast empire.
Bernie Kuchar, JP.
That's good. Thank you, Bernie.
Robin Moore, I live on Dunbar in the city, and JP.
Scott Moore. I live on Dunbar, and I'm married to Robin Moore.
George Tyler, Essex Junction City Council.
Diane Clemens, JP, and I am your presiding officer.
Yes, we'll go this way. I'm Dylan Giambattista. I live over on Arlington Street. City.
Brian Christie, appointed JP.
I'm Seth Adam Manley, also appointed JP.
Susan?
Susan McNamara Hill, I'm
Since you're in the room as well, Regina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Regina Mahoney, new city manager. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Regina. We'll go to the Zoom world. Amber?
I'm Amber Tebow, city councilor.
Deb?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Deb Billadew. I live on Maple Street. Just became a JP again in Essex Junction.
Thank you, Deb. Raj?
Hi, everybody. Raj Chawla, city council member, JP.
Thank you, Raj. And last and certainly not least, Patrick?
Pat, please, Andrew. Thank you. Pat Murray, JP, former select board and school board member.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate that, Pat. We'll ingrain that in my head, Pat. So nice to see you all. To move into the next business item with an election of a chair. This is because effective immediately, I am going to resign as chair of the Board of Civil Authority. I do not believe I can fulfill that duty and be the president for the City Council and do both duties well. So I would hereby like to formally resign from the position of the chair as the board or for the chair on the Board of Civil Authority. If you'd like to come up, join us at the table, join us over at this table.
Hey, there's Kelly.
We have a couple more members of this Board of Civil Authority coming in. Please come on up.
Okay.
Find a space.
We can probably squeeze another person up here. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
This device.
So, Kelly, just or other members of the Board of Civil Authority, if you just don't mind introducing yourself, so we can all just know who we are.
Sure. My name is Kelly McCutcheon-Adams. I'm a JP.
I'm Catherine Stebbins.
Catherine, thank you for being here. So you just missed. I formally. So we officially no longer have a chair. So as such, I will turn things over to Susan.
So we are open nominations for chair. Anyone have a nomination?
I nominate Dylan for.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain. Okay, well, great. All right, well, thanks. Um, just so everyone's clear, we are an appointed Board of Civil Authority. We have now taken our seats, and it's for the new city that we now reside in. We have a lot of experience amongst us. I recognize many of you in different roles. You've been involved with local participation and local government, maybe with some local election volunteering, whatever it may be. But we primarily serve as a board with different functions. They're set out in state statute. We are in an unusual situation here in that we're appointed near the end of a term. There's an election coming up where a new slate of justices of the peace will be elected and on that ballot. So we are serving out the duties for, in this unusual circumstance, after creations. So with that said, let me just pull up this agenda so I have it ready. We'll just go through it here. But looks like the first item of business that we have after election of a chair is to appoint election workers. And Susan, this is a bit of a ministerial function, but it's something that boards of civil authority do ahead of an election. Can you just describe it for us so we have the context?
So under the statute, it's the Board of Civil Authority that appoints election workers. And so we can't just have people to show up and work at the election without being appointed by the board. So we have a slate of previously appointed election workers as we plan to continue. Actually, we, at the first meeting we
Right.
had, before we had all the appointed people, we added
Right.
most of the people that were already working. And so Diana submitted a few more names. And in addition to that, the Secretary of State's office, every time they did a presentation, said, end your election, or end your assistant clerks, if they're appointed as election officials. And I always thought they just were, but I'm gonna add their names. So make sure that, because they're helping with the election, with the ballots that are coming in now. So, are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a process question. Does anyone have any questions for the clerk? Yeah.
I have a question. Are you keeping track of the political affiliations? Because I think the statute talks about,
Yeah, we don't.
as much
ask
as is
that.
possible,
Yeah.
make sure that there's an equal number. But of course,
You don't
you're drawing from a
register.
pool, and you're drawing from a pool, right?
Yeah.
And so are you?
Could you repeat the question?
It's a little difficult in Vermont because you don't register as a member of a party. So if somebody's on the voter checklist and they want to help out the polls, we don't usually ask what party they're affiliated with. It's a little different with the justice of the peace because we know what party they are with. And if we have situations where we need to have one person from each party, we can draw from the JPs, members of the board, for that purpose.
So just to clarify then, Vermont does not have party registration. So you select a ballot that you want to vote for if you participate in a primary election, but there's not actually a self-certification process as there is in some states. So that's an interesting part of our election system. Okay. That said, so I think to be responsive to the question then, we're not assessing party affiliation per se. We are looking at the available pool, and then in the event that there was something where partisan affiliation might be important, such as what you just described, you would look to the elected members in that instance in the future.
Yeah.
And it's a little quirky here. Was party affiliation described upon our appointment at all?
Well, it wasn't actually.
Yeah, because we all received our appointment letter from the governor, I assume. So when you stand for election on a ballot, you have a letter next to your name because of the way the primary balloting system works in, say, the general election system. But here, it's an unusual circumstance. I think, though, just in the future, what might make sense is we're going to have an election. A new Board of Civil Authority will be sworn in to take their terms, I'm guessing, early in the new year after the election in November. And I think that probably as we assess best practices, I've been sort of wondering, just as we set up a new board, it might make sense to do a couple things. Just have an educational session, and I know we can't find the actions of the future board, but maybe an educational session where the staff update us on procedures and the information available from the Secretary of State's office. I think actually as a member who served on the Town Board of Civil Authority, that would be welcome. And that way, just going forward, we're all aware of all this. And then in the future, I would welcome a conversation about just our procedures in general, and I think that might be the forum to do it. But of course, tonight, I heard someone say there's a city council meeting at 6:30. Is that right, Chair, or President?
Sir.
After the election, then
Okay. So February 1 is when that new slate would take office. So that's just helpful for information. I hope that helps in terms of just providing some context. Okay. So was the suite of, or the slate of officers or potential volunteers, I should say, was that circulated, and can you read them off?
I can read them.
Okay,
I don't think
great.
we didn't pass them around, sorry.
Okay.
So the names are Marlon Verasan, Laura Cunningham Berkey, and Karen Madden, and then David Santero. Those are 4 names, plus the 2 assistant clerks that help with the ballots now are Cheryl Brown and Jennifer Booker.
And then, of course, we all have the opportunity to volunteer for shifts, right?
Yeah, and in addition, because this came up at the town board of civil authority meeting last month, we wanted to make it clear that if you are on the ballot, normally if you're running for a state office or something, you can't help out at the polls. But if you're running just for JP, you can help out. So that's the situation. So that doesn't preclude you from helping it.
So if someone has, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
If someone has previously worked at an election, are we including them already?
We already voted them in at the last meeting we had.
Okay, so these are additions
Yes,
to that
these are-
larger.
these are
Okay,
additions, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, being that we were a brand new city, I needed to have the poll workers authorized. And so I had that request into the city council so that I could have people in August do their thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for that, members of the city council are members of the Board of Civil Authority. So prior to my appointment or your appointment, they were able to take an action. Should that? Okay. Yes.
How many election workers do we need, and do we have enough for all of the shifts, and how much more would we need? For all
Diane runs the
Well-
election over at the schools.
Right. So at the moment, I have one individual in each of the slots that's needed right now. If more activity shows up and we have more ballots that need to be processed or any of the other things that occur, I will indeed call the BCA as the next bit, because I've already gotten the poll workers who are not BCA to step up. So my line of attack is the people who are appointed and elected. Is next. Yeah, I'm putting you on warning right now.
So would it be in the realm of possibility that an emergency BCA meeting would need to be called?
No.
What's the process for that meeting?
JPs don't need to be appointed as election workers.
No,
because
they already are.
Yeah, I understand. If the anticipation of need increases.
I'll let you know. That's my job.
And I think if I'm hearing you, Diane, I mean, so as the election officer, the day of the polls, Diane is vested with authority to ensure that what happens is sufficient to handle things. And, you know, I know Diane has helped for years when we had town, village administration of elections. Certainly Susan's been part of the team at the clerk's office. So we made it through the primary election. And I was part of the volunteer corps. I think any of us who are available to do it, I know many of us work or have life, but it's certainly a really important role. And I know Diane would welcome the help. So look for your email. It sounds like Diane will let us know if she needs help with this.
I already got 2 shifts.
Oh, good. You got 2 of them? All right, good. Yeah, you get started.
Go to
That's
3.
great.
We'll go to 3.
Also, in the statute, if the majority of JP or Board of Civil Authority members that are there at the polls can meet and solve issues that arise at the polls.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So Diane, please keep us up to date on that. Good. And thank you for your work there.
Yeah, if anybody calls out, I'll let you guys know.
Great. Great. Okay, so with that, we have heard the names of the current election workers. So if there's any additional comment, if not, I would entertain a motion. Someone wants to. So Kelly is moving that we appoint election workers to the slate that was just read off.
I second.
Marcus Serta is seconding that motion. No additional comment? All right, let's hear a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous? Okay, so we have successfully conducted a vote other than for a chair. So congratulations. The next item on the agenda is early ballot processing. Susan?
So state statute allows the Board of Civil Authority to decide if we're going to process ballots early, which would mean we would have election workers and members of the board. Everything's being done right now for feeding Main Street, but we have people there to open the envelopes, and there's a process for doing this, so you can't see whose ballot you're looking at after you open the envelope. It's all spelled out in actually the document that I sent to you guys. And start feeding them through the machines. And sometimes it works to do that, and sometimes it's better to wait until we go to the polls. But to have the authority, I think right now we're asking for the authority to do that if we deem it necessary.
Okay.
So moved.
And so the process that you just described, you're essentially seeking, and the board is entertaining whether or not there should be authority to process ballots ahead of election day, following the guidance that's set out. It looked like you sent around something called the 2022 Election Procedures Guide, prepared by the Secretary of State's office. I just want to note here, this is interesting. So it was revised in July of 2022. So this is very current and follows all current state law because there have been amendments. I know.
Yes, there's a lot of changes in the last couple of years.
So I would welcome some discussion. I would just say that this guide, I've done a skim. I have not read it fully yet, but I've read previous iterations of it as a member of the Board of Civil Authority. It sets out a lot of details, process and procedures, and it describes what's in state law. The state law is sort of the basis for all of our elections, and then in Vermont we have local administration of elections. So it's up to us as members of the Board of Civil Authority and our clerk and others to play roles in that process. Diane plays an important role as the presiding officer. But it's all set out here. So if you haven't had a chance, I would encourage you to take a look at it before Election Day. It's a great guide. I know also that the League of Cities and Towns, which is a municipal advocacy organization, provides trainings. The Secretary of State's office is there as a resource as questions arise. So there's a lot of ways to get information on this topic. I am aware that there's great interest in elections right now in the news and elsewhere. So I think we all take this very seriously. But I am heartened by the fact that there is a process spelled out in here. And Susan, just to reiterate, if we were to process ballots early, we would be following all of the procedures and guidance provided by the Secretary of State's office as set forth in law, and you would be overseeing all of it to ensure that it's done properly. Okay, so any questions? I saw Andrew first. Yeah. And
Just as a point of process, I heard Bernie say that he would move the motion forward.
So there's a motion, but we can have discussion on the question before us.
But it should be
I
seconded.
think it just needs to be seconded so far for the process.
That's a
second
good
the
idea.
motion.
It sounds like Andrew Brown seconded. So thank you for that bit of process as I get up to speed here. So I saw first there, and then I saw a hand over here.
Sure, yeah. So, I just would like to speak to this topic. So just in general, the Australian ballot system that was adopted hundreds of years ago by most democracies in the world, there's two components of it. One of them is being able to vote in secret. In other words, your name is not attached to a ballot. And the other component of that is ballots aren't counted until all the ballots are cast. And, you know, that system has served democracy very well for hundreds of years. Now, I understand that we can't change, you know, what's been given to us or legislated to us. The only thing that we can do is do what we can to ensure security. And one of those things is to not count ballots early. Now, I fully understand that, you know, we would be following procedures. And, you know, I actually helped certify or witness certification of machines. And they certainly seem, from what we can see, to be secure. The biggest problem with these machines is that they're definitely network capable. So what that means is it has the circuitry in the machines to be connected to the network, to any network that's available, possibly. And, you know, none of us in this room can fully guarantee that those things can't be connected, which would allow that, you know, if they're in operation counting ballots, we cannot guarantee that a third party can't hack into them somehow to see how the count's going. So my recommendation is not to do early counting. You know, I know, Diane, you know, you've expressed concern that it would cause a lot of headache as far as extra work. And I'm fully, you know.
It's not early counting.
It's not early
counting. There's no counting being done. They're just feeding the ballots into the tabulator.
Yeah, I understand, but that is the same as counting. That's what the tabulator is doing when you're feeding those ballots in there.
It is, but nobody can see what it is until we're done.
Nobody in this room can guarantee to anybody that the machine can't be breached through a network.
Can I just ask a question, because I take your point, and I did hear a question in there. I thought for the clerk, are the machines at all connected to any networks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just sent an email to the Secretary of State's office, Will Sending.
Okay. Yeah.
I outlined six categories of vulnerabilities for our election system.
Okay.
I documented court proceedings, court documents, DHS documents, with bunches of questions. One of the court documents is that the Attorney General in Oregon admitted in the court document that a tabulator, a machine that has connectability, even though it's not connected to the internet, can be hacked.
Okay.
So these are facts that are on the table and are concerned. So I agree with my colleague here, Adam. We should not pre-process any ballots due to the vulnerability. I'm waiting for an answer from the Secretary of State's office on how to deal with these, how they're plugging the holes that are documented in the DHS report.
Okay. So we've heard a couple of comments. I think I see one over here. Oh, and so if you don't mind, I'll did I see your hand? Why don't we start?
I have a question for my colleague. I'd like to know if those court cases are Vermont court cases.
They are not, but
Thank you.
It doesn't change the technology of a modem that is not connected to the internet. Its capability of being hacked, even though it's not connected. It doesn't matter if it's a machine in Oregon or Vermont.
I think one thing I'd like to do is I do want to hear from other folks in the meeting. And I see a couple hands up with Raj and Patrick. But then also I do just want to make sure that as a group, I think it's appropriate to provide oversight, to ask questions, to present opinions. I think that's completely valid. I would avoid debate amongst us. I think it's healthy to have a discussion, but instead of in the legislature, for instance, you speak through sort of a presiding officer to diffuse any conflict as other boards do. And I think that's just important as we tackle issues. So Raj, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I would just say that we have a procedure set out by the legislature and the Secretary of State's office that we're going to follow. And that procedure really isn't up to debate or change. So let's just move on and either call the question. I don't think the debate about theories on the machines is appropriate for this body at this time, especially with the time we have left. So I'd encourage us to call the question and move on to the last agenda item. Thank you.
And I saw a hand from Patrick, but it looks like it's down. Patrick, did you have a comment or are you all set?
I did, but I concur with Raj. I do work in network security. That's my entire job. I would be happy to go over the specifics of the technology at a later date with anyone to describe how simply having the ability to connect to a network does not, in fact, make it hackable. But I think it's for a later time. I agree with Raj.
I see a couple more hands. Yeah, I saw yours first. No, I saw you first. Go ahead.
So yeah, and I totally understand.
I believe that I believe Raj called the question.
Oh, Paula. Well, I might have to turn to my parliamentarian for a second. See where we're at. I mean, in terms of process, how does calling a question impact discussion?
And it ceases discussion. Well, you vote on calling the question and then that passes the cease discussion.
Yeah, if the question is called, all future debate is done with.
Yeah.
You vote on the question.
So I think we should, given the process here, I would like to have that vote, and then I would like to just have a moment for reflection on this. So the motion on the table was to call the question. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
We're voting on voting.
Ceasing debate.
Ceasing debate.
You need to second the motion. Someone
Oh,
has to second.
apologies. Is there a second for the
Second.
motion? Thank you. And thank you to all those helping me through this first one. So the question is, shall we call the question? And all those voting in favor to do so, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed to calling the question, please say no.
Nope.
No.
So the motion has passed.
No, if you're online, you have to do a kind of a roll call vote. Sorry.
So for those online, no, this is very good. Thank you, George. We're gonna.
no, you don't need to do that.
And Susan, can we make sure that the meeting minutes reflect that? For those online, can you please tell us how you vote? And I'm trying to do this in an orderly way. I don't know how the council does it.
So with the law, everybody as a part of the board has to do a roll call vote at this point in time because since everybody isn't in the room. So if you just want to say our names,
Yeah.
we'll then respond with how we would vote.
Okay.
That's how I would offer.
And the vote is what again?
So the vote before us at this time is we are essentially holding a roll call vote on the motion to move the question. And I'll I stated that wrong. But essentially to
Cease debate.
debate and proceed as is with the question before us. So given this, I don't have a roll call sheet that's alphabetical or anything, so I will do my best and I might do some pointing since some of us are new. Okay. So what I will do is I'll do my best here with the names before me, and if I miss anyone, please bear with us. I know we want to wrap up this meeting shortly with the city council. Thank you. So the first would be Kelly Adams.
Aye.
Deb Bilodeau.
Aye.
Marcus Serta.
Aye.
Raj Shala.
Aye.
Brian Christie.
Aye.
Diane Clemens.
Aye.
Bernie Kuchar.
No.
Dylan Giambattista. Aye. Seth Manley.
No.
Jason Malucci. Don't believe it's in.
He's not here.
Ryan McLaren, who's not here. Robin Moore.
Aye.
Scott Moore.
Aye.
Patrick Murray.
Aye.
Catherine Stebbins.
Aye.
And now I'll do my best to go to the folks who are on the screen. Amber Thibault.
Aye.
Yeah, I'm taking a look here. So, well, we have Andrew Brown.
Aye. Raj is virtual.
There you go. George.
Yeah. Aye.
We already had Raj. Who am I missing?
Dan's.
Okay, so Dan, Karen.
Correct.
He's absent. Okay, so the motion is passed. So now we will hold a vote on the question before us, which is, should we approve the early ballot processing procedure as set forth? I would, and do I need a motion on that?
Yeah.
That already happened. That was Bernie and me.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Back a ways.
To process ballots.
So that motion already happened.
And it was seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, so, you have heard the question then, shall we approve this measure? All those voting yes, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those voting no?
No.
Now, I want to make sure, from a roll call perspective, do we need to now call the roll again?
Because it's not unanimous.
Well, this time, I will try to do it a little quicker. So we are now going to hold the vote because it was not unanimous. So I'm going to start reading the roll. Kelly Adams.
Aye.
Deb Bilodeau.
Aye.
Marcus Serta.
Aye.
Raj Shala.
Aye.
Brian Christie.
No.
Diane Clemens.
Aye.
Bernie Kuchar.
Aye.
Dylan Giambattista. Aye. Seth Manley.
No.
Jason Malucci is not here. Ryan McLaren is absent. Robin Moore. Scott Moore.
Aye.
Patrick Murray.
Aye.
Catherine Sevens.
Aye.
Let's see if I can do this. Andrew Brown.
Aye.
George Tyler.
Aye.
Amber Thibault.
Aye.
Oh, that's it.
I believe that concludes the roll. All right. So with that, the motion passed. Or the vote passed. So the next item on our agenda, and I will draw attention to the fact that the city council had a meeting set at 6:30. And I do just want to quickly reflect, we have another item on our agenda, but recognizing there was discussion tonight, I mean, I think it does underscore an opportunity for some education going forward. And of course, there will be election of a new board coming up in November, who will take their seat February 1st of the coming year. And I think at that time, just given some of the discussion, I do think it's worthwhile for clerk's office staff and others to provide that education to make sure that folks have it at hand. And I also just want to let folks know I'm happy to take any of these conversations offline since I appointed to this position of serving as your chair. And certainly encourage you to be in touch as well. I know some had said they had talked to the Secretary of State's office. That's our statewide election official, certainly the clerk's office. And I hope that we will all work together in a spirit of partnership to do this work because it's very important. It's been going on for hundreds of years. And many of us have participated for years here in the community to good effect. So just take my personal privilege there to say that. And I would like to move to the next agenda item, which is the politicking policy. And Susan, I know there was an enclosure with board material minutes for that as well.
Yeah, so that's a policy that was adopted by the town board of civil authority, and they are still using that. It's worked well for giving direction to candidates at the polling places, what they can and can't do with their signs. So I guess I was wondering if the board wanted to adopt that policy as well.
I'll make a motion that the board adopt the policy on politicking, campaigning, and signs at the polling place as presented at the meeting.
I will second.
Okay. So we've heard a motion, second. Any discussion? Okay. So seeing no discussion here, all those in favor of supporting adoption of the politicking policy as provided in the meeting minutes, in the materials, please signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed, no? Well, that was a unanimous vote, so I don't believe we need a roll call. Thank you for that. So I see no further business here. We are scheduled to adjourn. We're a few minutes over, but my offer stands. If anyone would like to discuss this, I'm certainly available to do so. I know Diane is always happy to respond to my emails when I have questions. So Diane, thank you for that. And without any further discussion here, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, Bernie?
I had a question regarding, you said sometime in November we can do BCA. Is this board good until February 1st?
So we have no further meetings scheduled. Look for emails from Susan in the event.
Good. Motion to adjourn.
All right, so Deb has made a motion to adjourn. I assume we need a second for that.
We do.
Second.
Okay.
So we have a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We are.
Roll
Thank you.
call. Thank you, BCA. Thank you, Dylan.
And I'm here to address my ducks. I spoke with Terry Haas, and she received a complaint from one of my neighbors regarding the ducks. And specifically, well, I'm here to ask the council for an exemption so that I can keep my ducks.
As I understand, the current ordinance is only allowing for chickens, and right?
I believe so, and my apologies for that. The reason why I got ducks was my misinterpretation of the code, and that's completely my fault. Sorry about that. When I looked into the code, the municipal code, it specifically addresses chickens, but no other animals. And I also saw that Section 1702 says that all agricultural processes are exempt from the code. So I thought I was in the clear. However, when I spoke with Terry Haas, she explained to me the land development code and why I was wrong.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, so when I spoke with my neighbor, she told me that her only concern was smell. And what I believe she didn't realize was right on the property line between our houses, I was keeping two 100-gallon compost bins. Since during the summertime, I moved those. Those were one of the reasons why I moved them was because it was emitting a particularly foul odor. And so I moved them to the completely other side of my property, and I don't have any problems with smell. And when I've asked friends and family for a subjective or objective opinion, they told me that they don't really smell anything. So given that I believe that the source of the odor has been taken care of, I hope that would,
Right. Yeah, so just in terms of even just a process portion, which maybe should have started off with this in the beginning. So this would be the opportunity for us to hear what the concern is, for us to hear and understand a little bit. From this point in time, we only have a limited knowledge of what really the intricacies are of this, and we're only able to make, we only have so much latitude to make a decision on something that isn't publicly warned on our agenda. So basically, we can hear the information, receive the information, we can ask staff to do some research, we can ask for some other steps to happen, and then on a future agenda item, what we can do is then address this in a more formal capacity where we would have the decision or the capability to make a decision of a yes or a no. So just even for tonight's portion, we can have this a brief dialogue to try and understand a little bit, but this isn't going to be the end.
Okay.
So you know that somewhat coming into the conversation.
Makes sense to me.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you in, if this takes a couple of weeks for us to make a decision to give you an exemption or not, is that okay? Are you in imminent danger of losing your ducks right now?
The only danger of me losing my ducks is from you guys.
Okay.
So no one has taken ducks as of now.
No.
Ducks are still there.
I haven't had any problem.
Okay. Great. Sorry to make light of it, but
No, it's completely fine.
great. Raj, Amber, any questions at this point in time? If the board is okay, what I would like to see happen from here is an opportunity, staff, if you can do a little bit of research. Regina, you and I can talk offline to help set the direction, and then it'll probably take a few weeks before it comes back. In the meantime, ducks are there.
Sure.
So
I would just like to say that in addition to them providing, food, one of the main reasons why I have them is for a permaculture, so that I can produce my own fertilizers in a green fashion. I mean, there's no system that we are aware of that is sustainable that is greener. And given the current state of the economy and shortages and everything, fertilizers have been particularly hard to get a hold of, and they've been extremely expensive. So I can create my own fertilizers and add them to my gardens.
something that may be helpful is if you have resources that help to explain what the benefits of I don't even know what the right phrase would be, but for raising ducks in your home and keeping ducks on in a residential property, if you have those kinds of benefits that would be beneficial for us to have for a future conversation to help inform us of all sides of the equation.
Sure.
I mean, speaking from personal experience, other than distant relatives having a farm in other parts of the state, I have no idea what the benefits are for ducks or cons.
Well, for gardening, it's fertilizer gold.
Great.
Yeah. And
It's
it's
good.
working really well. I also have the city's first and only craft cannabis cultivation. I have a tier 1 cultivation this year, and the fertilizer's been extremely helpful for that. Depending on how the council has voted and what the zoning will be next year will determine whether I can continue with that or not. But in terms of benefits, it's been extremely beneficial.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions? Raj, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, do any of you longer term counselors recall the process and the length of the process for approving chickens? I think George and Dan and Andrew, you were on the board at that point, but Dan's not here.
Well, we do, but we have the person probably in all of Essex Junction who knows more about it sitting in the audience, but I don't. So I'm going to, at risk of making a terrible mistake, Lori, if you don't mind. It was back, when was it?
It was very early on in my tenure on that.
It was early in your political career. So it was like 2009 or 10 or something like that. Yeah. It was, yeah. And we had a request for a lot of people to have chickens.
But it was but I guess I'm getting at it was a deliberate, long, public hearing kind of situation where
yeah,
it was deliberated and all of that as part of the zoning.
I think we just passed it as a separate ordinance back then, Raj.
Okay. All right, great.
But just to elaborate a little bit more, it did take a few months of public hearings,
Right.
of public comments,
Right.
of that kind of process. It was not a quick thing. It was also a new ordinance, as we did not allow any other livestock outside of the agricultural zone. So that also likely added to the time that it took. Any other questions, counselors? do you have any other questions for us or things you want to make sure we know today, knowing that this is the first part of a process?
Not that I can think of, but
Okay. If you do, please reach out at any point in time. Our emails and contact information are all available at essexjunction.org. You have Terry's information, I assume Regina's as well. So please let us know if you have other questions, and we'll make sure to be in touch with you as to what we're going to do from here.
okay. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well. I did not see any other members of the public with questions or comments, so we will go ahead and move into business item 5A, which is a presentation from Town Meeting Television.
Good job. I have to get nervous. Welcome, folks. Thanks for having us here, even though we're always in your room, sort of. Annabelle running the camera tonight. So I'm here to just give you an update on what this last fiscal year has been. And I think I've talked to most of you. And then just run down our request for municipal contribution. As you know, we have been doing this work of diversifying revenue as an organization and a service that gets its funding primarily from cable subscribers. So folks that buy cable, they get that little PEG fee, and that money comes to the trustees who hires CCTV to manage a contract to provide services, both meeting coverage, but election coverage. We just wrapped up 30 election forums with local candidates, and internships, training, and public facilities to help open the doors to local government. And so that work that we do is primarily funded by the folks who buy cable. And, you know, as cable subscriptions are going down and the increase for our services, certainly over the last 2 years, how we run meetings is up, you know, has changed. And we hope that this helps you feel at least somewhat, you know, most of the time, this is a somewhat seamless and enjoyable process to meet and not be always on Zoom or having to exclude people from the process who can't come. Briefly, I guess I'll just pause there and find out if you have any questions, because there are a number of points on here in this memo that I sent and that you all should have received.
Yeah, I only had just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
But first of all, as I think I said last year, really appreciate the work that Megan, you and your staff do to really help to open the doors to of democracy to the broader community, and in particular, helping out with our hybrid meeting process to ensure that, again, those who can't be here or choose not to for whatever reason can participate from the comfort of their own home. Really do appreciate that. Curiously, how are we doing on utilization in terms of the number of meetings that we are allotted for?
So I unfortunately have the Essex. So on your memo that you have there, it should say that we have produced, and my computer died right before I got here. So somebody could just let me know. It should say there a number. We've live streamed, archived, and
42.
Oh, I missed
42. And so you have 3 meetings a month. So you do 3 times 12.
We're doing well.
You're doing well. You're doing well.
Right.
We could, we did in the last contract negotiation decide to move. We have a big basket of general programming, and we decided as part of our outreach strategies to move an individual program into the general. I count them by community, but unfortunately our location, and not unfortunately, but you know, Burlington being the center of a lot of activities gets a lot of coverage, and we would like to do more coverage for the city. So things like Juneteenth celebration or dedication at the park. So that's something where we encourage you to let us know. And certainly Amber, as a trustee, can let us know. And Regina, we have a relationship as your new city manager. It's hard to say, city manager. just let us know if there are other programs to do outside of that meeting coverage.
And along that line, and thinking about for next year's budget, if we did want to increase it, also in the sense that historically we've had our municipal board, but then we've also had a planning commission. Now we also have a development review board, and so there might be another reason to have additional coverage of various municipal meetings, let alone the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where if we decided to do that, when would you need to know from a budgetary standpoint?
Well, you need to discuss it as part of your budget, and that, if that's something that you want to do, that's where you would switch over to hiring CCTV to do that additional coverage. And it's outlined here, the per cost, and we do a municipal rate because we're using the same equipment that the trustees own. So that municipal rate of 95 an hour, we do about 7 hours per meeting. Although we can bill that on a, we keep track of exactly how much time. So if a meeting takes, if it's 3 hours of time, it's a 3 hour
Right.
billing. So that's one way to cut that. So, for example, we cover some meetings and it's a precise number, or you could set aside a certain amount and say, we want to give you 10,000 extra to do 10 extra meetings. Although it would be, that's not the right math.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
We won't
and we
do the math.
can talk about that more if you have more questions. I can have that conversation with Regina. There's also, if you have community meetings that are being held completely virtually, and I don't know at what point January, if it's going to flip over that you have to have them in a high, if you're allowed to continue to do them completely virtually, but meetings that you're recording yourself, you can submit to us to archive and be part of our, your really repository of content. We're just finishing up. We got a grant from the National Endowment of the Humanities, and our archivist is just finishing up the work of really rationalizing our archival system and how we're bringing things in and making sure that we have reliable and redundant storage. And that's the thing that, when you think about like, what's the legacy we're going to leave for the future, it's going to be all of these archival resources, community events, meetings, conversations, the conversation that just happened at the Board of Civil Authority. I'm like, this is so interesting to have this conversation archived at this moment in history of part of our kind of the community dialogue. So.
Yeah. Those are all my questions. Counselors, any other questions?
We'll say that, we will, one of the big things that CCTV is undertaking on behalf of Town Meeting TV is this continued work with the legislature. The legislature in FY23, it was actually a combination of a special allotment in FY22 and FY23, awarded $900,000 to the 24 access centers around the state. So just Town Meeting TV is one of 24 centers that do this kind of coverage. We will see another 900,000, and then we're going to go for 2 more years of what's called bridge funding as part of this work to support cable access. That it's about 30 this year. It's about 36,000 that came into Town Meeting TV or CCTV on behalf of Town Meeting TV. That's all, the long game is to come up with another funding mechanism that would replace this reliance on the cable right-of-way legislation. So if you think about it, changes in gas tax, the lowering, people driving less or people driving electric vehicles, we're seeing a change, right? So we're in this big policy shift as we modernize the world and have to come up with different funding mechanisms for different services that we find important. And that's one, and your help, your support at the legislative levels, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure Lori's hearing you.
Lori,
loud
thank
and
you.
clear and-
I
yep.
am.
Yeah, we've talked about it, yeah.
Regina, was there anything that you had? Well,
That's it. No, I don't have anything else.
Great.
I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you.
Thanks, folks.
We appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
And you're in good hands with Val.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we will then transition into the next agenda item, which, sorry, taking me a moment here. We now have a presentation from Essex Rescue, and I believe I see that we have Colleen on the screen with us.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Thank you for.
I have also Peter Matolo, who is our president of our board, with us. I don't know if you see him up there.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Peter.
There we go. So I understand that our time is a little bit short this evening. The past presentations we've done, this has certainly taken a bit more time. So I figured I would start at kind of the key points and then take the rest of the time to answer questions if that works for everyone, unless there is something specific that you would like me to address right off the bat.
I think if you want to hit the high points, that's great. We should have all read the presentation, so if there are certain points from that you want to make sure that we hear, please.
Sure.
Do so.
Excellent. Okay. So going to page 7 of the presentation that I provided, which is reimbursement and billing terminology. I think what is most important with this is understanding the terminology that is there and what exactly that means. This is probably one of the biggest factors which is impacting our ability to meet our own operating budget year to year, because what we're billing out is not what we're able to get back in reimbursement from insurance companies. So when we talk about charges, or when you're looking through the presentation and it's mentioning charges, the charges are what, when we provide the service, what we're actually billing out to the insurance companies, and that we don't change the rate based on who the provider of the insurance is or the carrier is. It is billed based on a defined service level or itemized level of service we provide. The allowable is what the contracted rate is of the insurance company that they will cover. So the most obvious and well-known carrier that this impacts is Medicare. Medicare is the federal standard, basically, who says, regardless of what services you provide at this level of service, we're going to reimburse this much, and it doesn't matter any other factors. So when we talk about what is allowed, based on what we charge, there is a certain percentage of it which is written off by the insurance company immediately, and that is, we're never going to be able to reclaim that amount. When we talk about expected, that is based on the allowable. So what the insurance company says is allowed to be reimbursed. The expected is what we can go after for reimbursement. Collected is what we actually have in our bank account that we have been able to retrieve from the service that we provide. The next important piece to understand is that Essex Rescue is our primary source of revenue from insurance is Medicaid and Medicare, and that's 64% of our annual income. And that is a fixed rate. So regardless of what service we are providing, the max that we will ever be able to recover from care would be $495 from Medicare. And that would be at the 80%, and the patient themselves would be responsible for 20% of the remaining of that. The Medicaid covers 100%, but again, reimburses at a lower rate at $389. So the rest of our insurance revenue is commercial insurance and things like that. But those pieces are probably the most important factors to understand as to why we're struggling to meet our end of year budget, because regardless of the call volume that keeps going up, the reimbursement rate doesn't change, and not all of the calls that we're responding to are actually billable. I was able to have a meeting with Regina, and it was a pleasure to meet her. But to explain some of the things that are not well understood about, yes, our call volume may increase by 200, maybe 300 calls. We still have to respond to those calls. And even though we don't transport, doesn't mean that we haven't rendered some expense in providing a level of care. And the best example would be a cardiac arrest victim, or someone who has overdosed, or somebody who's experiencing a diabetic emergency, where we provide care and aren't going to change the outcome and don't transport. So we have put everything into that individual that we would have had we transported them, but it does not change the outcome to transport them in a cardiac arrest scenario. So that revenue will never get back. The diabetic emergency or the overdose victim, we treat those individuals as if we were taking them to the hospital. But if they decide that they no longer want treatment once they have reached a level of mentation that is acceptable and safe to leave them at home, they are legally, they have the right to make that decision not to go. Those are also costs that we can't recover. That doesn't mean that we're not going to take care of those individuals when they call and treat their life threat. It just means that those are costs that we will have to, occur without reimbursement. So it's just important to understand that yes, we bill insurance, but that doesn't mean that we're going to recover all the costs. So out of last year, we billed $1.8 million. Which would help us significantly with a $2.4 million budget. But when we're only able to recover between $800,000 and $900,000 of that, or that's what's allowed, we're really at a loss. We're not in this to make money. We have done our best to keep our per capita rates as low as possible, as long as we could. And I can't speak for my predecessors that have kept our rates where they have. But with COVID and everything else, it became very apparent that we were not going to be able to continue providing the service if we didn't ask for what we needed to meet our budget at zero. And I do understand that those are big numbers and big jumps. My hope is that getting this next increase to where we need to be is going to get our budget to a point where we can stabilize ourselves and make smaller incremental changes as we go, without, in a sense, stealing from our reserve account, which funds ambulances in the future and necessary equipment that we have to replace, without having to ask for loans, liens, and bonds and things like that. So I am happy to answer any questions people may have. I just hope that would, if the terminology and things didn't make sense, help to explain some of that.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. And just before even going into any questions, just that we haven't spoken before, just want to extend an appreciation for the sense of the last 2 years in the work that your staff, the volunteers who are the first responders, who have gone to calls in a once in 100-year pandemic, not knowing whether you yourselves are going to be in harm's risk, the condition of the people who you're going to, and just the amount of stress that you all experience. So just want to name that and appreciate you all for that work. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So now I'm going to get into little other questions.
Of course, that's okay.
And a couple of just questions on the presentation or on the slides. in the slide that's titled organizational efforts, there's a couple of things I just am wondering what they mean. One is prioritize spending to reduce operational costs. When I hear that, that makes it sound as if maybe expenses aren't being prioritized. And so is that what is intended?
No, it's just, I think that always runs through people's minds to say, this organization is hurting, and it appears that, they're bringing in reasonable amount of funds. How come this is still the situation? And I just want to ensure everyone that, we are cognizant of the general economic situation everybody is sitting in, and we're not just throwing funds out the window. We are very aware of our spending, and the last few years we haven't even provided our volunteers with a service or recognition banquet, which I think is it's downright not okay when these people are giving hours and hours for nothing. So I just want people to understand that, they're not sending me to conferences. They're not, we're not spending, money on things that aren't necessary. We're being very, very careful with the things and making meaningful purchases that are necessary right now. We were fortunate in this last 2 budget years ago to take part in a grant that funded putting paramedics through paramedic education. Because of COVID and everything, it really messed up some of their clinical hours, which provided a lot of funds that didn't end up getting used. We were able to purchase a brand new life pack for $52,000 and some other necessary equipment by utilizing that grant, which hopefully will make up for some of the money that we haven't been able to put into our reserve because we've had that deficit in our budget. But it's just using things as best we can to make up those deficits.
Yeah, and to just add on top of what Colleen said here, been treasurer for 2 years, president second time around. I think the point there was just to make sure that we were reiterating to the community that we're being as fiscally responsible as we can, and we can go into more detail beyond even what Colleen mentioned about deferring ambulance purchases, extending as much as we can into the length of time that we can use the equipment that we have, and wanted to call that out so that there's really no stone left unturned as we come forward looking for contributions to meet our bottom line.
Great, I appreciate that. And on that same slide, my only other question on there was there's the bullet where the words of inappropriate utilization of the ambulance. Bit of a chuckle just thinking as to what that meant. I want to rely on that.
I'm sure that it was in the best of intentions. It is exactly what you're imagining. It is being called for things that are what would have been in the past deemed completely inappropriate to call an ambulance for. The problem is our healthcare system is in crisis, and it is not set up to support all avenues of our socioeconomic makeup. And whether it be a facility that it is their job to take care of individuals and unable to meet those individuals' needs, or it's somebody in the community that is mentally needing more assistance either at home or emotionally. And those are the types of calls that we're getting the crews up at night to go, which for people who are volunteering and have to go to work the next day, 3 calls in a row for a nose sore, a toe injury, and somebody not feeling well who we've seen 3 times throughout the day, those become stressors that it's hard to continue to convince volunteers and our staff, for that matter, to want to keep doing this job. I have met with some of the facility leadership to discuss them calling us rather than using the appropriate transport methods, such as their own transport methods that they fund, or the individual's family, which I know was a problem during COVID, as well as utilizing the patient's healthcare team to proactively prevent these inappropriate calls to EMS. We shouldn't be used as the last resort. We are for emergencies. So yes, we definitely have an uptick in calls that don't necessarily meet the criteria of what we would call a life threat.
Yeah, that's actually a lot better than what was in my head when I first read.
Oh, good.
more along the lines of joyrides and having great parties. So.
No, that's.
Response. And that makes me feel a lot better than what I had in mind. And so I guess really the last thing I wanted to mention, I know when we were here in the city, when we were a village separating from the town, one of the things that we had been told is that you all had gone to the Town of Essex Select Board and said that there was going to be an increase again in a future year. So we kind of knew that there was going to be a budgetary ask that was going to be bigger than what we were anticipating.
Sure.
I will say that personally, I was not anticipating a near double as to what had been projected. And in looking at just the FY 22, 23, and 24 budgets, all of which are running deficits, in some ways curious as to how you can sustain that, while at the same time it raises the question around this isn't going to be like a sustainable practice of once a year coming to our board and asking for a near double increase. And I know you've heard this from other municipalities as well, other member municipalities, but it makes me wonder about the overall governance structure. And especially since a third of the funding is about to be coming from municipalities, it makes me think that what we might want to start looking and talking about is, should our boards be appointing people to your board so that way we can be better connected, so that way we can help to ensure that things are going strong, because we need emergency medical services. Whether it's somebody falling and not being able to get up, somebody having a cardiac arrest in a true medical emergency, somebody needs to go when 911 is called. That's, in my mind, a basis of the basic level of supports that our community needs to provide. And so just to help solve that dynamic, I think that's a venue we're going to need to explore within the next year or so.
I think that is a very fair statement, and one that especially Peter and I have gone back and forth with many times. I think Peter could probably speak to the best of this, given that he's on the board, and some of what you brought up is very much in line with where we're going. So Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And it is a really good question, and I think the transparency that we're looking for, and also the interaction that we're looking for, is following those same lines. So one of the things that we were coming to you and the other communities that we represent to ask is how best to get representation and inclusion on our board. Is it an appointed person in a community advisory position? What other opportunities can we use to provide more of a voice from the community within the agency, and more of a regular flow of information from the agency back to our represented communities? And I do just want to address a couple of things, because it's a fair question about the management and how do we go from double-digit growth over the past few years. And I think Colleen was very kind talking about like the basis of fiscal responsibility that we've come from. One of the biggest things that we've faced, and it is a complex number of reasons that have brought this about, but our workforce model has flipped on its head. I've been with this agency for 10 years, and when I started, we had volunteers in the numbers of 60s and 70s and full-time employees in the 3 to 5 range. We have now completely flipped that around, and we have volunteers that are close to half that amount, and we have doubled the number of full-time employees that we require to get that ambulance staffed and out on the road. So right off the bat, our workforce model has changed underneath us. And one of the biggest reasons that you're seeing the jump that you are is this past year, we've been proactive for the first time that I can remember about getting ahead of that change. So without going into too much of the detail during this time, I know we're limited, but happy to share more details with you about what that looks like and why we can at least stand here before you with a prediction of saying, we're not going to expect double-digit growth from a personnel standpoint. We're going to be in line with economic indicators and the overall economic growth and requirements of the country based on like a CPI, rather than totally retooling our workforce. So I hope I answered both questions. The first one is definitely looking for your support on how to get some board representation, and happy to continue that conversation. And then also about the workforce.
Yeah, I do appreciate hearing that. Thank you. And I also appreciate hearing what I had assumed anyway around that flip of the reduction in volunteers and that increase in full-time staff. Just given some of the experiences we see in other communities who have tried to create their own emergency services and have frankly failed because of their inability to find people to actually then fill up the ambulance. So I do appreciate that. I would point to, in terms of just other examples, Green Mountain Transit, Winooski Valley Parks District, Town Meeting Television, who was just presenting earlier, all of whom are entities that we have and will have some level of representation on within their board, some level of decision making then within that board, and they've come to us seeking money. I think those are models that could very well work similarly for Essex Rescue to help ensure the sustainability of the organization, especially given this increase from FY22 of a less than 10% of your revenue coming from municipal contributions to now over 30% 2 years later. If that's just going to continue to be the pattern, where it's becoming a municipal service nearly exclusively, instead of the previous model of insurance, donations, and subscriptions.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can understand the need for, and we share that need as well, to both understand how to best serve the communities that we are representing. So completely open to that. And again, if you want to appoint somebody directly, if we want to take that conversation beyond this meeting, there are a lot of different models that we can follow. We do have a provision in our bylaws right now for our community advisory board that we can reactivate. It has been inactive for a number of years since I've been on the board. So I think that might just be an oversight of, we didn't keep that thread going with our communities. So I know at one time it was populated, but for whatever reason, it has gone out of favor. And that is something we can reinvigorate immediately as we pursue bylaw changes to reshape what our physical board makeup is.
Yeah, I think that we could take that conversation offline in terms of the possible future ways to be involved. Of course, unless other city councilors want to continue to have that conversation. I'm not trying to squash it, and I would take that as the opportunity to just turn it over. Do other councilors have?
Well, yeah, thanks, and that's a good segue, because I think I agree with Andrew, but I'd actually like to take it a step further, and I'm wondering if at some point, and nothing I'm about to say it should be interpreted as anything like a criticism, but it looks like your funding is unpredictable, your costs are unpredictable, and I'm wondering if it might at some point, since we're talking about potentially having more representation on your board, do you think, my question to both of you, do you think that maybe a sort of a global restructuring of how you do things and coming more under the municipal veil, so to speak, would benefit you in terms of predictability of funding? And let me ask this other question I have. If you let's just say, let's take it to go to an extreme. What if we worked with the other 4 communities that you served and said, we're going to create a kind of a municipal district, a municipal emergency rescue district. So you become very, very different than what you are now, but would that benefit you? But would doing something like that, and you might not have looked into it, would that preclude you from collecting money from Medicare and Medicaid? Do you need to be completely independent from any, government structure? No, so you don't. I mean, I'm just curious if that at some point this almost looks like we want to have a kind of a summit meeting with you, not try to patch something up together for you right now, but definitely we all need your service. Your costs are probably going to continue to go up, and probably if we really looked into doing it some other way, it would be much more expensive. So I think, generally speaking, my understanding and impression is that you're providing great service, but you're every year you're scrambling, trying to find and anticipate more funding, and coming around to us and looking for more and maybe a sort of a global restructuring of your organization might benefit. And again, that's not meant in any way as a criticism, but I don't know if you've thought about doing something like that.
Not taken that way at all, and I very much appreciate the innovative thinking on this. I don't think it would prevent us from seeking any other funding.
Right.
I am not quite sure how that would impact something like our subscription plan, but I do think at this point, it would be foolish of us not to investigate all options that we could do. I think it would be great to get all parties in one room to share and express and just kind of talk through all of these pieces. And perhaps that's something that Peter and I could work on. I know right now is a busy time for people, but to maybe start thinking about what options are out there.
Yeah.
And I think just further,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
just to further that, I think two things that I'd like to make clear. One is you've hit on the exact thing that we've taken on over the last 12 to 18 months, which is a recognition that our organizational structure, our workforce model is historically proven, but not able to sustain future expectations. So we have taken on a major internal restructuring, both at the board and the operational level. And having said that is not to say that it shouldn't continue to evolve. It has to. We are also a nonprofit organization whose primary goal is serving the community. So there's no ego in this situation at all about how we do that. We're open to the best methods in order to accomplish that goal. And I appreciate you recognizing the overhead that it would require to pursue an alternate means of starting an agency. I'm here because I do still think that this is the best game in town for the services that we provide. Having said that, it has to continue to innovate, and we're open to and in need of that support. So 100% in agreement.
Okay. I have a lot of ideas about what you might do, but I think I'll zip it up right now, and maybe we'll have a more substantive discussion later on.
Look forward
Sounds
to
good to me.
It is.
Yeah. Raj, Amber, any questions?
None for me.
I do not, but really appreciate their services.
Great. Did any members, we haven't directly turned anything over lately, did any members of the public want to ask any questions on this matter? Lori?
Thank you for that. And I don't want to ask a question, just maybe a suggestion. Lori Houghton. I appreciate the conversation. It's a needed service, but I also know the situation that city council is in, so it's great to have this conversation. Colleen touched on Medicare and Medicaid, and that is one of the biggest issues. One thing that I think was in the presentation, but she did not touch on, is that they're not considered an essential service, and that's a big problem. So I know as the legislative delegation, we plan to write a letter to our congressional delegation
and explain that we need some support in that regard, both for Medicare and for essential service. And it would be great either if City Council would join on or write their own letter to the congressional delegation. Because without Medicare and Medicaid increasing, I do believe we're going to keep having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to put that to us to sign either onto or sign our own. If you don't mind, let me know what you think would be best, and we'll go that path.
Great, I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Lori. All right, Regina, anything you had?
Nope.
Pauline, Peter, thank you for being here. Look forward to our future conversations and continuing the relationship.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Right. And next on our agenda, we have a discussion and possible action around 2 Lincoln renovations. I know. Just another small topic.
Lots of small topics.
John.
Oh. So I can start us off if that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think as everybody knows, the hope and desire is to get everybody over here as of July 1st. And really what that means right now is essentially the clerk, which is one individual person right now, but there are also 2 other staff people that we're trying to manage in addition to who we have now by July 1. So essentially that means 10 staff. The plans that you folks have looked at in the past, just so you know, as a reminder, included 13 staff. So that would also be assessor, an enforcement officer, and I believe it's the admin staff for the manager. So we're trying to look at 10 at the moment just to see what exactly we have to accommodate for July 1, and thinking through that, trying to figure out what this building can accommodate. The other real hope is that we're not putting staff in the basement. So given that it's really not possible in the space that we have without something giving, whether upstairs, senior center, or this room, and then if we lose this room, how do we accommodate that? So John and Lynn in his office have put just a couple more plans together. We have also had discussions with staff. That's why Harlan is here as well. Just thinking through options. But in terms of what would be really helpful on my end from you folks tonight is just some kind of overall direction. What is flexible in the scheme, and what's your real hope and desire for this building, both near term, long term, or make the long term happen faster and just get to that more quickly. So hopefully that's a good enough kind of ground for you to get started.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I know, just quickly, some of the things that we've talked about in the past are things like wanting to have a meeting space that can fully accommodate a municipal meeting. Today it's going well for the people who we have currently. There have been times where when we've had more than 15 or 20 people, this room just does not function for that purpose anymore. And so something that can accommodate a larger group makes sense, even in this world of hybrid meetings. Staff not being in the basement, I know, was something we've talked about in the past. I don't think we've said yes, no, either way. But ultimately, I'm fairly certain we can say we want to do what's best for the health and well-being of our community, including our staff and those who come into the building. And so we don't want to have people coming into a portion of the building if there's mold, mildew, asbestos, other things that just people shouldn't be working in. Other than that, we just want to make sure that we can accommodate staff in the way that is the best way possible.
I have just one question about, if I can, John. In terms of, if I look at the very first diagram, and I don't think we don't have it up, but we don't need to put it up. One of the questions I had from early on is that we said we're not going to do any renovations to the existing senior center or teen center. And I'm wondering how we came to that decision. Probably obvious, but why should we, since they're not part of the city government, we're just not going to touch them. But in looking at the total space, and I'm looking at your big diagram, it's almost half of the entire building edifice here is senior center downstairs and teen center upstairs. And I'm wondering, since those organizations moved into those spaces back long ago in the 20th century, and they were just allowed to take as much space as they needed, and because the trustees, I guess, weren't using the space, so they kind of just spread out. And I'm wondering if we renovated those spaces, if we put parentheses around the whole business of not renovating those spaces, and said we could do some minor renovation to the teen center and the senior center, such that they would lose some of their existing space, but the space that they move into would be optimized. In other words, if they're doing like upstairs in the teen center, it looks to me, when I've gone up there, half of the space is just storage. There's just desks and chairs stuck in offices and bags, and there's a whole room full of snacks and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if as an architect, if you could go in and look at what they actually need, what they actually use, what their actually daily populations are, and so forth. If you couldn't reorganize, if we paid for it, if you couldn't reorganize those spaces in such a way that their total footprint could be reduced, but we would have more space for city government to move into.
That's a great question, and it is leading because we've started our various designs, and this is, I've been joking in my office, this is probably the 5th time I've done a study on this building for municipal offices, whether it's village or village plus town or town collectively or one entity alone or what have you. So I've done the exercise a number of times. I know there's a lot of square footage in here that is currently not used for municipal government purposes. We have not programmed the teen center or the senior center to see what their ideal size is. I'm sure that they would, like to have as much space as they have now, because that's kind of the mentality. But that's an interesting idea that would say, well, we could maybe trade you some space and your new arrangement would be better. It might not have as much space, but it'd be better. I think the biggest unknown is upstairs.
Yeah.
So our concept and some of the previous concept tried to use some of upstairs, and we had a few extra people, and then there were some ideas. Well, maybe some of the major spaces like the meeting room goes upstairs, and that the rework of the building itself that had to happen to make that come to life seemed to me a lot. It's a big lift to do that, but you could move staff upstairs in a heartbeat, change the name on the door, it's a staff office, and you don't really have to do anything else. So that's an easy one if arrangements can be made with whoever is in all the offices upstairs or whatever they're using them for. If you just said, look, we need a couple more offices, let's see what we can do, I'm sure that would be productive and fairly inexpensive. So the challenge, we've had a couple of different challenges. The first one was don't go into those spaces, but I think in our 2 or 3 plans there, I think we start to sneak a person or two up into the upstairs offices.
Right. If I could just have a dialogue. I mean, when I went up there, it seems like the place where the main city office is now, where Regina, where everybody is, upstairs from there, that's just one big open room. And there's a table and there's some chairs sort of scattered around it, and I'm not sure it's actually being used for anything. It doesn't look like it is. It's just a big empty
I've
room.
been, over the course of the last couple of years, we've been up there 3 or 4 times, just sort of checking it out, trying to make sure we understood the building.
Right.
And most of the time, I would say most of the spaces were not populated with people.
Right.
There were a few times, including the large room, where there was something going on. And so, again, I have no idea exactly what their program is or who's there or how many days a week they're on site. But those are all normal questions that one would ask a user group about their facility to see what size it should be.
Right.
And whether they had extra space or they were downsizing or needed more or whatever.
Right, and I mean that's been the issue with this. We started talking about this, and then we get on to other things back in February. And I was going, well, wait, why? Who said we can't rearrange the space upstairs or knock down some walls with some of those offices up there and put a few municipal offices up there? I understand that it means you have to put an elevator in, but again, that's not the end of the world.
That's a tricky question. Now, you just have to be careful with that one because you actually have the obligation right now today to have accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But if you move office to office, different people up and down, as long as that program or service or individual is able to do what they need to do with the public who's coming to the building, you didn't change anything from today's expectation that you're accessible to a new arrangement. But as soon as you put a major primary function like a meeting room or something else of significance up there, that changes the picture. So you can rearrange your people. You still have the obligation to be accessible. At some point, you will decide you're doing enough that you want to put the elevator in. And at some point, you may be required by some challenge to put the elevator in.
Yeah, I mean, I do, if you don't mind me just going, I mean, I do wonder if we're saying, okay, we're going to make this the seat of city government for years to come. It's a legacy building and we're going to coddle it and take care of it and renovate it. It just seems like pretty obvious right now that we would want to make it accessible throughout. To try to figure out some configuration, like, well, if we don't do this and we don't do this and we keep this empty and we don't use this space, then we don't have to build an elevator. It seems like it seems like a really dumb thing to be doing. Yeah. I mean, at what point do you bite the bullet and see it's a public building, it needs to be accessible throughout the building. And I understand how much that adds to the cost, but maybe could you, on average, what would a small elevator in a building like this cost?
You won't be able to put in a small elevator.
Well,
we'll probably want to put in the smallest one you're technically allowed to put in, but it's still an elevator.
Okay.
And it's going to cost you somewhere in the $100,000 range.
The $100,000.
Plus or minus, let's say 20. Like the elevator's less, but you've got to build a shaft.
Sure.
You've got some other things to rearrange. So
well, we could have one of those fancy glass elevators on the outside of the building
elevator
that's lit up and you see all of it, 5 corners. You know.
That would not be
It's exciting. And
We could charge people. Maybe,
yes.
Maybe 5
see,
stories tall.
See, that's it. You charge for the ride to go up there.
There are many options, and
All right.
putting one outside the building is actually not a bad option,
right?
Because it preserves the building.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, you got to cut a hole in it somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. But it's not it's 100,000 is a lot, but it's not a by any means in terms of the overall expenditure we're talking about. It's not a backbreaker.
Right.
Okay.
So if I can just interject 2 quick things.
Yep.
In terms of the teen center, or in terms of of Essex Chips, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays after school, that is a teen or tween center where when school ends, that upstairs area minus the office space is used by kids after school who run in here like crazy and enjoy the spaces.
Right.
Beforehand, it's generally used for staff to do the things to prepare for and some other programming. But ultimately, it would be good to really have this conversation, to have Christina from the Teen Center help to inform this process, to make sure that we're using as much factual information as possible. The other thing with the elevator, and touching the upstairs spaces. Our original plans that you provided had those. So we have talked about it, so I don't recall saying we can't touch those spaces. And I don't think we have talked about not touching those spaces. So it's on the table.
I've gotten different direction at different study points.
Okay.
So when we had more people and we were trying to do more with the building, and the elevator was an option, and there was a scheme that had the meeting space upstairs, so that was a definite, you can't, make that kind of renovation without the trigger for the elevator. So those are the kind of things that I think the one piece that is missing from the current couple of schemes that you have is really the larger meeting room. So we took this as the basis. We said, if we can keep this, what does that mean? It basically means some staff has to go upstairs. If that works out great, this room can stay the way it is and be as utilized as it is now, but doesn't get bigger. If you want it to get bigger, it really kind of moves somewhere. And my preference is to keep it on the main floor somewhere, but that has an impact immediately on the senior center. And so until there's a resolution to what's moving, where can it go, how long term is this, and what are the pieces that in play,
Right.
That's where we stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
It again, a completely different direction. I want to get back to this, but I it might be good to know in what Regina started talking about is what's the window for construction? Let's say by the end of this year, we have a very firm plan of where we want to go, and it goes out to bid and everything. I mean, what's the total window for this kind of a renovation?
Well, that is
and I know it
also
depends
a
on what
tough
we're
issue.
doing. I understand,
Well,
but generally speaking.
Harlan can tell you how many bids we got for the Brownell Library re-roofing, which seemed to be an easy project, and the number is less than desirable today. But what's going on is the construction industry is very busy. You need to give the design side and the construction side extra time to be able to create a project. Just because I put it out to bid doesn't mean anybody's going to show up. I've never seen anything like it in 25 years. It's been, not quite that tricky, but right now, we have to call contractors. We have to beg them to look at the drawings. We have to really offer it up to them on a plate to try and get their interest, because they just frankly are too busy, and their real trouble is they can't find the adequate subcontractors who are basically handpicking their jobs now, because it's a labor issue way down the, all the way out. So you could have drawings finished. Let's say if I had them finished, like I'm trying to put a little project for the school district out to bid this month, so that maybe I can get it done next summer.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
It's not going to be done.
And it's
Yeah.
so when we say July 1, something needs to be in place because we've got staff moving in July 1. That tells me that we need to be very efficient at how we do this, and we probably don't want to try and get the elevator and everything else into the picture that fast. It might be possible, but I'm not seeing strong evidence in the bidding community that they're willing to jump that fast.
George, are you at a point to take a break? I know Raj has been.
Yeah.
away
Yes.
for
Oh,
a
yeah.
while.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Only if you want to keep going, though.
No. I just wanted to before.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Raj. Just to, the one point I did want to make is that so we haven't. It would be good to have the teen center and CHIPS to get a sense of their population, their needs. How much space do they actually need? And do you have, in your magical architectural mind, are there algorithms for saying, well, it's this activity, it's this many people, they therefore need this much square footage? Do you have those? You have those kinds of things. So if we had a sense of their population in the teen center and and for the senior center, what's their average daily population? What's their use? What's the total square footage? You could give a pretty good estimate of whether, yeah, this is a reasonable space for them to occupy if we can divide it up and condition it the way we need to. And let's say, for example, they're using a lot of the senior center as storage. Well, we put some really nice storage bins in the basement, because storage could go in the basement, and then that would free up more space. That sort of thing. You can provide that information. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Raj.
Yeah, thanks. So just quick priorities for me, because the lot's been talked about already. So I'll just give you my thought process on this. It sounds like nothing's going to be quick. So we'll probably be dealing with 2 phases, which is a little disappointing, but totally understandable. 100% for the elevator. I think we really ought to think about with because the senior center and the teen center use the space at times that can be shared for the most part. I think we really need to be thinking about how we lay them out, how we set them up. They might have their own particular spaces, but in the middle is some common space they share. We have limited, the community asked us to separate and do this, and we have limited space. So the other thing we might consider is going to the school board and talking to them about, getting a conversation about the teen center with them. I also know sounds like the school board's interested in increasing multi-generational opportunities for their students. They may also be open to talking about something around the senior center. But I think it's going to take some time, which I don't know if we have, to kind of flesh all that out. But I do think that those 2 entities can share some space. They may still have their own dedicated, but maybe somewhere in the middle is a common room that they share. Common space is also really hard in this community. We have the Colvard room. I can't really think of any other municipal space people can rent except for the main childcare room at EJRP in Maple Street. So as we're thinking about this, the meeting room needs to be sufficiently large for a good meeting. And we also need to be able to, service the community as a community center of sorts. So, I think we're going to need a big space for that. I'm hoping we're going to plan on having more employees. We're doing this now for a few $1 million, a couple $1 million that we're, creating space at the end of the second phase, that is expandable. And I guess the last thing I'd say, which I don't know how popular this is going to be, but I think we really need to start thinking about, as we welcome more people downtown, we really need to start thinking about public facilities. We have a railroad station renovation that we actually won't own. So I don't know if we can impact that design, but we can certainly consider some kind of potentially, exterior entrance for some kind of bathroom facility in this building as we renovate. Maybe not in the first phase. But I think that as we get more and more people down here, I'm not sure it's fair to rely on the businesses to provide that burden for the people that are spending time here. Had a couple things, I can't quite remember what they are now, but yeah, I guess I'm all for getting what we can getting our employees back over to Lincoln as soon as possible, if we can manage that.
Thank you, Raj. Amber, were there things that you had?
I think most of my thoughts have been covered. I mean, personally, I know you mentioned, Andrew, like the basement. I would prefer to keep folks out of the basement, have that be storage, as George indicated. And for me, the goal has always been to shoot for what our end goal is, not to do hey, we'll do 10 this time and then maybe we'll add a couple of employees. The goal is to be at 13. So I think we need to be going for 13 spaces for folks and then some. So as Raj said, if we have to do 2 phases, it is what it is, but that's where I see this going.
Thank you, Amber. Go ahead, George.
Let me, I want to get, just to be clear, so it sounds like and Regina, I think that you're suggesting, you kind of alluded to this. So what we're saying is that we want to do phase one, which might be sort of a minor renovation because by July we are going to just need the space. And so this wouldn't be part of the real permanent rebuild. But we're just going to do a kind of a minor rebuild to make sure we have accommodations for everybody by July 1st next year. And then the major rebuild of other parts of the building, that's phase 2. Is that what you're saying?
That was my thinking in the reality of July 1.
Right.
And how to make that work.
Okay.
It's not the only option necessarily. We could certainly be thinking through how to just figure out our ultimate end goal, figure out how to make that work. The reality is just not likely to be July 1.
Right.
So there is a second part of this agenda item where we could potentially go into executive session to figure out if there are other lease type options that we need to be thinking through.
Okay.
And, certainly without a doubt, big picture, if we're doing one renovation, that is ultimately cheaper than 2 renovations. So that makes some sense. It's really more just how do we accommodate this July 1 deadline, and how best do we accommodate that?
Okay.
And just along that line, looking to the experts in the room who do this on a regular basis, my assumption is to accommodate 13 people coming in here. The only way we're going to be able to do that is by July 1st is to have there be a smaller renovation to get the bodies in here to be able to function. And that the longer term ideals of things like a larger meeting room, things like possibly an elevator, so on and so forth, those may need to wait for a phase 2. Would that be a factual statement given the economy, given the capabilities of labor? Small project to get people in here as a phase 1 is probably the only realistic thing to get done by July 1st.
That is your best bet. However, I would characterize phase 1 as being, it can be a lot more attractive than just something to get the bodies in here, because you actually have the space. You have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of a reconfiguration. It's fairly minor. I think it's a really good plan because it allows you to keep going, use the space you actually have. And I think if you can begin discussions with the utilization of the upstairs offices, you're all the way there with very little renovation that affects fabric of the building, which I think if you're to get to your phase 2 and your long-term goals, we've got to really study what parts of the building you're willing to give up or change, if any. And you guys are stewards of this building. This is a public building that's been here as in one form or fashion for a long time. It is a namesake building for the community. It's a real feature. So you want to be careful with the modifications that happen to it, and I think that's what's going to take a little time, because there's some movement in these plans towards creating more of a staff area and a public area, and I think that's good. But I just did a tour of. I just did a tour of the state capitol last night, and it was fascinating because they went through all the same questions about how do we keep this old beautiful building a functioning municipal, governmental facility and essentially a museum for the people, right? How do you do that? And it's fascinating to see how they've wrestled with that over the years and the things that they've changed. So you have a similar situation here where the more municipal activity you're looking to do here, the business of the municipality, you need those spaces. But you also have a public face to present, and you've really got to balance that carefully, especially if you're planning on disturbing things and building things. So I just want to say this phase 1 gives you a chance to get our people in here, to get them working again without a lot of rearranging, especially if for example, if you put a few people upstairs, you don't have to touch this room, right? So the discussions on who's upstairs and how does it get used and is it efficient or can we consolidate and share is a really important one. And, you know, I can help guide that discussion, but it needs to be the principal players here, people running the programs and yourselves.
And it was pretty loud and clear to us, loud and clear to me, where our community said, be an independent municipality, have few ties to any other municipality, and so as such, to fully see that through, we need to have this be the center of government. And along that line, we have tenants who are utilizing, to some degree, some of the spaces, but we've heard loud and clear from the community that we need to make this happen.
Yeah.
So yes, we need to have those conversations with our tenants to make sure that they then can continue to do some of the great work that they do. And at the same time, we need to see the community's voice through of providing a hub for municipal government. So I only offer that it's great to hear that the phase one can be more than just get warm bodies in the building to do the good work that needs to happen, but it can be a part of a broader improvement.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was mentioned as well about not touching the spaces, like the senior center or the main room upstairs, what I think we talked about is to not improve them for those uses, but also I think about things like in that main room for Essex Chips, when I've had some tours up there and my own child who goes up there, there's a giant beam of some kind that is causing some buckling, which sounds like there could be some safety issues. And so I wonder as well about, do we, while we're here, make some improvements like that to ensure the long-term use, viability, and safety of this building?
So we've looked at that a number of times. I think somebody actually analyzed it for you, so I'm relatively comfortable that it's not a significant concern, although it looks odd and there's a column in a very strange spot. My understanding is that used to be a fire station, so the whole bay arrangement is different than what it looks like now. But one of the photos right across the hall here is, or maybe one in the books that we have, it shows fire station.
Yes.
Right. So the modifications again to this building have been extensive over the years. So you could do a lot and still not be completely out of character in the life of the building. But we just need to be sure that's what we want to do. So we can analyze anything you want, and we know who can do it. But I think you're seeing a vestige of some previous life that is still there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that was only the 20th century, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I think I'm taking away from the conversation is a general consensus, please correct me if I'm wrong, counselors, to move forward with a phase one of some type to do what we can to ensure July 1st that this can be a functioning municipal hub, with that mindset of it being a warm, inviting space to the public to be that municipal hub. So more than my articulation of getting our staff in the building, stopping there, but making sure that they have good, adequate workspace.
And the basement.
And no one's in the basement.
Real issue with the basement is it just is dampish as many basements are, and so I think part of the conversation should be about some air systems that improve the air quality down there, whether there's anybody down there or not. I mean, it still is a decent research and temporary space. If you're not assigned permanently to it, it should be fine. But air quality should be, we have the tools to do better.
Yeah,
it should be part of the improvement.
I think I'm totally on board with that.
That was something we talked about in one of our first conversations, was about ensuring that the HVAC system, or that the airflow system in general, is something that, given what we know about air quality, COVID concerns, things like that, that our staff are able to work in as healthy of an atmosphere to breathe in as possible.
Yeah. Good.
What else?
One question. This is probably like a glass ball, not real question that can be answered, but any thoughts in terms of our ability to get somebody to bid on a project does that go up significantly if we're completely out of the building and they can renovate it in a much faster time frame versus if we're trying to accommodate people here and slowly shift?
It'll be less expensive for the construction activity and faster if you're not in their way. So I can't remember what happened when we renovated the clerk's area last time, whether they temporarily set up in some of the other spaces, but that happened in a couple of months or something. It wasn't very long, and the mostly cosmetic and new counters and flooring and so forth. But it can be done with you here, but you'll have an expense to move and temporarily set up somewhere, but it can be done.
Good question.
And certainly if we got as extensive as elevators and major reconfiguration that you would probably want out of them.
See, Raj.
Andrew, one more question.
Yep, go ahead, Raj.
John, has there been any kind, this has been a long drawn out conversation multiple times, as you said, so I apologize for if we've already talked about this. Has there been any kind of look at sort of future proofing the efficiency of the building and really kind of taking a look if we're having to move HVAC? I mean, are there any steps we should be taking that we haven't talked about that are going to add significant expense to give all this work a longer lifespan and be cheaper to operate? It'd be a nicer building to work in.
A lot of those questions come down to the mechanical and electrical system. So we would want to bring in designers that would handle those trades. You know, for example, the building doesn't have any hollow spots that you can run ductwork. So do you create some, do you take over old chimney shafts? I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it, but they all require some pretty delicate coordination to avoid being obvious. So there are many challenges like that with these old buildings. It's done all the time. It's kind of a sliding scale between how much time and energy went into thinking about how to do it in a clever way versus just making it happen and putting in drop ceilings.
Well, I guess I'd want to, try to preserve the character, but also make sure that, again, we're sort of future proofing this. And while it may be a little expensive up front, over the next 10 or 20 years lifespan of some of that mechanical that we're saving over time.
Yeah.
I guess that's a thought. And I'm just wondering if that.
You're doing some mechanical, certainly mechanical upgrades. The newer mechanical systems are evolving very quickly in terms of efficiency and fuel source and so on. And so we'd want to get on that and maybe look at the holistically at the entire building. I think your heating actually is pretty good down there. That has already been redone and it's fairly efficient, but the cooling side and ventilation side probably is where the improvements could really stand to be looked at.
Well, thank you.
So it sounds like next steps, there'll be conversations with the senior center and CHIPS around space needs, how to factor that all in. Is there anything else for today's purposes that anybody needs to continue to move this process forward so we can make July 1st happen?
Good. I'll continue to work with Regina to get any particulars about what you're really saying about what spaces are good or bad or details on the plans, but that's fine. We can keep going.
Are there decisions you need from us today? Sure.
I gave you 3 plans. Other than that, I think we have some more talking to do.
Okay. Great. Thank you, John, again for coming and your work so far.
My pleasure. It's all. I know we're gonna get it right because we've done it so many times now.
Yes.
Right.
The real key is to ask the right questions so that the direction is where you want it to go.
Right. And the planning is important to get it done right. So we don't want to screw that up.
Right. So thank you for your questions tonight. They were good. If I need clarification on anything, I'll reach out.
I have one last question.
Yeah.
In all of these plans, you show, and it's just curious, you show a large sitting area around the vault. And my question is, there's actually nothing, all of the Village of Essex Junction documents are going to stay in the town vault. So the only documents that would be going into the city vault, the city vault, will be documents that are created as of now, post July 2022. And all of those, I'm assuming, are going to be have digital files. So they'll. My point is that do you really need a very large seating area that you could put the terminals for the digital files anywhere in the building, and those few older folks or people who insist on having, I want to see the paper document. Do they need that much space? What are your thoughts on that?
I like those questions because I had the same questions, and I think the indications initially were that there would start to be pages that come here.
Okay.
As of next year, and July or sometime next year, 2024. There's an arrangement where everything up until then stays at the town vault, and after that things start to show up here. So you're absolutely right. The vault's going to have nothing in it but, a page or two, as I forget how many pages a year that end up getting filled in. But the vault itself, if that's the story, the vault should be relatively, it'll have capacity for a long time to come.
Yes.
We definitely have to figure this out with Susan. So she definitely has started city books over there at the town. And so they will come. And that, to me, in and of itself means she is still taking paper. I think they are also digitized right away and put into a digital system, but I think there is still going to be paper. But this is definitely a question we've got to work out.
Yeah, because in my mind, we can look up almost anything now. We're all used to saying, okay, well, I don't have to be, I could be at home, I could be anywhere and find what I need. But that's sort of a legal question in some ways. Like what does the real legal title search person have to see in order for it to be considered valid? And so I would, that's something that I think Regina and I already identified as a process that affects space. And you're right, if the answer isn't, they need to be physically and individually supervised by somebody in person while they're holding those documents, and they're not allowed out. There's a space requirement for that.
Yeah.
If that goes away, you're right. Much smaller.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions for John?
I'm good.
Thank you for your time. I know this is a lot of work, so.
Thank you.
You're the one doing a lot of work, John. Thank you. I think next is the budget one. Just don't have the right language.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Discussion on fiscal 24 budget ideas from city councilors and updates on current efforts.
Yeah. So really the main point of this agenda item is to get your folks' feedback on your ideas and thoughts for FY24 budget. But the memo itself just gives you a little bit of an update on a few things, just so you can kind of keep those in the back of your mind. To Lincoln was one of those. And then in the memo, you see a ARPA funds balance report, just in terms of what's actually been spent on that and what has been thought of but potentially not needed. For example, you had at some point talked about $40,000 for masks that may really not be as necessary moving forward. So that's that. Amtrak station renovation, we are working on that between Rick Hamlin, Jess, and myself. And really what we've got to figure out is a $600,000 match for that particular project. Finance separation, just a a heads up that, so that full plan for finance to be completely separated requires 3 people. So we are thinking that we're able to hire that third person and really get separated quicker, more like January 1, which is great. Then this isn't really a current project so much as we know that this is on FY24 to start thinking about what we're going to do about a public works facility going
Right.
forward.
Right.
So just sort of brief updates on that, and really the thought process here is what are your thoughts about FY24 needs, desires, before we bring the department budgets your way?
I've been speaking first. Does somebody else want to go first?
If you don't mind, I don't know. Since I'm live, I guess I can just jump right in. I just as a side note, Regina, and the Amtrak station renovation. I believe that there were, there was an actual plan, and it's not just the renovation. There's a whole traffic pattern and reconfiguration of the traffic, and I think that was all part of the package that went with the application for the grant. That you probably know that, but I'm not sure you do. I'm not.
It is in my inbox. I have not digested it yet.
Okay. And then I'm delighted to see that we're going to begin the conversation on the public works facility upgrade. And I note that Andrew got you the copy. I could quick, and the only thing I'll say is that John did an estimate of the space needs, and the estimated cost was pretty broad. It was somewhere between 3 million to 6 million. So it's a pretty wide window, depending on what we decide on. And it's a big leap, but it's not huge. It's not an insurmountable amount of money, but leads me to my last point, and then I'll let Amber and Raj talk. That's why I look at those two things, and that's why I'm very interested in trying to keep any new costs, since we've got so many new moving parts with the city and new sources of revenue, but great big new expenditures. I'd like to keep, personally, just my opinion, I would like to keep any new expenditures limited as much as possible, and just try to deliver some kind of a bit of a tax relief to our constituents, since that's what we promised them when separating from the town. We didn't promise them. We kind of said that would probably happen.
The numbers to maintain the services that were being provided in FY22, that as separate municipalities, that there would be a reduction for those services overall.
Yep.
New things were not at all factored into that, and that was one of the cautions of, if we want to do anything new, then that would not be in part of the analysis, and that would be a totally external factor that would come into play.
Right, and that's why I'm such a curmudgeon about doing any new things right now.
Gotcha. Roger, Amber, do either of you want to go, or you want me to go? I think I see Amber saying me go. I'm not seeing Roger's hand up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, I guess. So
I'll go.
So to go against what George just said around not doing new things, to at least have an informed conversation. I asked a couple of years ago, and it's been asked from the community for years, around having proactive ordinance enforcement and code ordinance enforcement in a proactive way beyond just increasing the amount of money that we give to our legal counsel to have them send letters. In addition to that, something that we've talked about, George, I think this was like 6, 7 or so years ago, but we've talked about having a rental registry.
Yes.
We had Winooski come and talk about their process.
Right.
Potentially that can be a way to be cost neutral if it's done in a certain way. And at the same time, there could be some alignment with code enforcement as well as with a health officer, something that the state has failed to really improve upon for years, similar with rental housing registry. And I don't think we're at a point in time where we can just continue to wait for the state to solve this problem. Similar, we're going to be hearing later on about a housing trust fund, but if there are funds that we need to prepare for separating our housing commission to have our own, and potentially for our own housing trust fund. At the same time, something I've talked to a few other committee members about, not on the council, but just on other committees, having training dollars for our committee members to attend various trainings to help them improve their own capabilities to help serve our community. And theoretically, if we all wanted to attend trainings, I don't think we've ever really had the conversation about how to do that other than, hey, this thing from VLCT came up. So potentially having some dollars for our committee members, council members, regardless of where they are, to be able to take advantage of some training to help improve their public service. The other thing that we also haven't talked about in a long time is the fire department building as well. Is not as bad as the public works building, but certainly is not something that's can really continue for the next 20 years as I understand it. And so having some level of conversation with Chief Gaborio and the fire department around, should there be some planning for fiscal 25, 26 on design, and when to really start that process in this mix.
Andrew, if you just mind me, just as I agree with the code enforcement, but I'm just curious if that should be part of an expanded community development office and not. If we look around at other municipalities of our size, they all have larger community development offices. We've been getting by with a 2-person operation for years. So I'd support that. I think it's a good idea, but I'm just a configuration of it.
I would assume that it would likely be some type of an expansion of the community development department, so that way it's not, the same person approving of applications is the same person forcing to separate that duty, and that's where there could theoretically be some alignment with that rental registry in some capacity.
Yeah.
To also look at ways as to help reduce that cost for our community. Those are my items.
All right, I'll go. Let's keep things moving along. I'll say I agree with everything that's been said so far, just to move things along. Maybe add to the rental registry. I've been hearing from some of our new tenants and some of the stories about what they're enduring in some of the new buildings as tenants. So if a rental registry includes some sort of inspection or other method for them to seek some redress, or have an ear in the municipality for some of what they're dealing with, I think that would be a good thing. Happy to talk to anybody offline about it. Trying to think if there's anything else that hasn't been said already, but I think the code enforcement is going to be really important moving forward, and also enough funds in that department, not just the salary and benefits, to follow up on some of those actions, because it's, as it's been explained to me over a few years, it's one thing to send a letter, but if you can't follow it up for weeks or months, then it's sort of useless. I guess the only other thing would be, we have to figure out what our relationship is with the joint group that is working on DEI work, Essex Best. As of now, the town funded this year for that group. So I guess, getting input from you, Regina, from staff and from the counselors on how we want to move forward. A lot of that work that's happening in that group right now is looking at citizen advisory boards for our police department. It's been a great conversation. Chief Hogue is very much involved in that. So how does that look, and what does that work look like? I don't want to just drop the DEI work because we separated. So I think that needs to be part of the conversation on budget day or before. And Andrew, I'll agree with your training for committee members and for us. We want to welcome more people to the table and more people to committees and elected office and get some more voices in and different voices. And if we can't support that, I don't think we're talking about huge amounts of money, but if someone could apply for a small 3-figure grant to learn something about the committee they're serving on or the board they're serving on, I think that's valuable. And we might be able to start slow with that and see how it goes. I guess the last thing for ordinance enforcement was, we've talked about this a number of times, and I think we're going to talk about it again when we review the LDC, but I think we need a really good look at those fees. to help offset some of that enforcement action and really come up to date. I think John said the last time we talked about the LDC that they were way behind and very low compared to other communities. So I think that's all I got right now.
Thank you, Raj. Amber?
Took a lot of my thunder, but I agree with everything that's been said. The one thing that hasn't been talked about is the stipends that we did for committee members. And I do want to make sure that we are continuing to do that moving forward. I think that's been significantly beneficial. We've seen a lot of new committee members. And I know I've had folks that have said specifically to me how much they appreciate that stipend. I agree on the code enforcement piece, and I was going to say exactly what Raj said about revenue, because I'm a broken record, and I say this every single year. So this year is not going to be any different. We always focus on the expense and we never focus on the revenue. And so I know we did just increase fees on the planning side, but even just taking a look at those again, costs have gone up. Everyone is increasing fees. I always use the example just because it's one that I'm thoroughly familiar with. We charge $50 to get a zoning compliance certificate to issue that to a person who's selling their house. And we're sending an employee out to that house to do an inspection. Are we recouping any at $50? Granted, we just increased it from $25, so we are seeing, some benefit of that. But just thinking through those kinds of things in the fee structure.
Thank you, Amber. Great thoughts. Anything else? Any questions, Regina? Or?
I don't think so. That is super helpful. I would like to get a little bit more information from folks, and I don't need it right now, about when you say code enforcement and what's not being enforced. I would love to hear specifically what that means. So, but don't need that right now. But unless you're ready to give me some specific right now.
Sure.
I'm sure we could all give you a novel. So
yeah, I mean, we're meeting with you individually, right? So maybe
be careful what you ask for.
The whole time putting all this together.
Well, yeah.
I'm happy to share one just for the community who's listening either physically here or remotely. There's a dumpster, for instance, from a construction project where whether the construction project is still continuing or not, the dumpster has historically been in a place where it should not have been, and has been there literally for 6 to 8 months. And it took a community member to say to us, hey, this has been going on for a while. Can somebody enforce it? And it's that kind of thing where we shouldn't necessarily rely on our community members to have a concern or express a concern to ensure that the rules are being followed.
Another example is my neighborhood on one street has, I think, maybe now 10 cars on 2 properties that are unregistered junk, 5 or 6 of them, maybe 4 or 5 of them, up against an impaired stream for over 10 or 15 years. That kind of, there's a property on West Street. There's a couple properties on West Street. Just a way to have someone that can receive these calls and, research whether it is actually an issue and try to follow up with the landowner to work with them to see if there's a way to correct any possible, potential issues. Mm-hmm. And if they're not willing to rectify anything, then to follow up further, I think. We're also welcoming cannabis, and that's taking up an enormous amount of time. It'll smooth out, I think, right? I think we'll get into a rhythm with that, just like everything else. But
that's the point, Raj, is you just hit upon. It's when we want somebody here to take the phone calls, it's going a step further. We want somebody to be proactive and driving down Pearl Street, see the number of violations of the LDC and stop and say, hey, you do recognize that sandwich boards are a temporary thing. They're not a permanent thing.
Right. We've got
that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Along that line as a slight aside with sandwich boards. Something that, again, a previous iteration of this board had talked about was, do we offer a municipal sandwich board?
Yeah.
Where there might be a fee associated with it, but it would allow for some additional opportunities to be out longer, or something along that line had been floated around as another way of not just looking at the expense side, but as a potential revenue thing.
Well, isn't it
help service the community?
Isn't it sort of up to the property owner if they have more businesses than the sign they originally applied for? I mean, shouldn't the landlord be coming back and applying for a larger sign if they've added businesses to these places? Because I think a lot of them, for instance, on Pearl Street are because, I mean, they're out there because there's no signage for them. There's no space on the commercial sign that's been put out on Pearl Street. And I'm not going to say what I'm thinking of.
I don't think that's it.
Sorry?
Raj, I don't think the sandwich boards are out for advertisement purposes. They're not out for signage purposes.
Right.
Well, I mean, the donut place has two on Pearl Street. It has no sign because it's behind and there's no room on that side of Post Office Plaza. So that's, that's the only, it's advertising. But if the property owner increased the size of his sign and put that business in a sign or her sign, then that, it's just one of those.
Yeah. But
It's
the
sort of
other,
proliferated because nobody's been out there doing anything about it. I think.
right. The other 3 sandwich boards that you could stand in front of that sandwich board and throw a stick at are all advertising though.
Right.
I think the question is that if we have a sandwich board ordinance,
right,
and it's never enforced, then what's the point of having the ordinance?
Right.
Correct.
But then, how much of that do you want to do?
Right.
So that's
Yeah, that was just an example, George. It's just an example.
Right.
I could think of a whole lot of other ones.
But if we have other specific examples, then yeah, let's send them to Regina. Would you say by the end of this week is a reasonable time, or do you need a deadline?
I don't need a deadline.
Okay.
This is not going to be a simple solution that is solved immediately, but it would be helpful really in thinking through for FY24 budget purposes.
Yep.
So it does not need to be immediate, but yeah.
Sounds like a wicked problem.
Exactly.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those ideas. That's really helpful.
Thank you, Regina. I believe the next item on our agenda is a discussion and potential action on tree farm management. As is outlined in the memo, and I would just reiterate, I really think it would be important for our board to have this conversation in executive session. So are we okay just continuing on with the rest of the agenda and then doing an executive session at the end?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Great.
Yeah.
So into the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Amber. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. Unanimously. And we will move into the reading file as well as board member comments. One of the things just to point out again, the all hazard mitigation plan, that teeny tiny little document, that if anybody is having any sleeping issues, please take a read. Just to get that out there sooner rather than later, because it will be coming to us for our next meeting, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have to have it memorized, right?
Absolutely. There is a quiz at the end, oral presentation.
I do have one update on that.
Okay.
They have changed us to the city of Essex Junction. Brad Luck is no longer manager for the town. And so we've made some improvements there. So,
Nice.
yeah.
It's good to know. When I first talked about this, there was a lot of frustration. But I appreciate hearing that. Also just wanted to point out the permit amendment for the 92 to 100 Pearl Street. Also to make that plug for the CSWD warning on the bond vote for the recycling facility, and to also just explicitly state for anybody listening, that is not a proactively mailed out ballot, and so you must request that. You can do it through the Secretary of State's office. You can contact Susan McNamara Hill, our clerk, to request that ballot. Otherwise, you will need to show up to vote either at the high school or through early voting. And then something that I didn't mention at the end of our last meeting was just the appreciation on Junction Jam. Again, I don't think we had the opportunity to appreciate the staff who really helped to put that on.
Yep.
So Ashley, Harlan, Brad, I know that there were a slew of other people who were significantly involved in the planning, the execution. Really appreciate that. It was a fantastic event.
Yep.
Really appreciated being there. From what I understand, it was certainly the first day was very well attended from what I saw and experienced. I would love to just see an update at some point in time around how many of the vouchers ended up being used, just out of curiosity. But to the staff, thank you again. Also to the volunteers who've helped over the years to plan that. Thank you all. And on that note, I see Amber's hand is up.
Well, because I don't think we talked about ordinances enough tonight, I thought I would bring up again the trash ordinance. And I would really like an update on that at the next meeting or the meeting thereafter, because I feel like we've had this conversation multiple times. And Regina, obviously this is the first time you're probably hearing this, but we passed a revised noise ordinance to not allow trash. I'm not going to get the right word for it, but basically them using the truck before 7 a.m. And I know personally, I'm still hearing it at 6 o'clock and earlier. So in the downtown core. So I'm not sure where we're at with that and the level of communication we've had with the trash haulers, the larger trash haulers, et cetera.
George or Raj, anything?
I'm good.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have the executive session motion handy?
You were going to ask that.
You'd think by now I would.
I have it in a piece of paper.
Oh, wait, I got it. I got one.
You got it?
Yeah, I'm just going to do both motions at once. I'll move to find the premature general public knowledge regarding contracts associated with the Tree Farm Recreation Facility would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage because the council risks disclosing its negotiation strategy if it discusses the contract terms in public. I further move that we go into executive session to discuss contracts under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes and to negotiate or secure real estate purchase or lease options under Title I, Section 313A2 of the Vermont statutes and to include Regina Mahoney, Brad Luck, and Harlan Smith.
I'll second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Great, so that has passed unanimously. Thank you all. I'd like for us to just stay in the room here. I think it'll just make it easier. Yeah, we'll take a few minute break though. At the end, are we gonna make a motion to approve of anything? Do you think?
Possibly. No.
Think so.
We just have feedback.
Yeah. All right. So then, yeah, we won't come back into the public session afterwards.
Okay.
So thank you all. Have a good night. In terms of that portion, the Zoom, though, we have control of Zoom through this computer here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I've
if
got-
I shut this down and I leave soon, you guys should be like.
Okay.
Sweet.
So I can test that out now. I can leave Zoom off of this and then you guys like that.
Yeah.
How that works.
Great.
Yeah, we'll just have,
I still see it. Perfect.
yeah. There might be some audio.
Yeah, 5-minute
things
break.
We need to figure out
Somewhat.
audio things, but okay, I'm stopping recording.